if you get into college based on, a false sense of mastery of, your physics class in high school, and you are an engineering major in college, I don't think you're going to be able to keep up. If you weren't tested in high school, you don't have those foundations, those basics. And if not in college, then eventually in the workforce.
Outstanding is a production of The Washington Stand, your source for news and commentary from a biblical worldview.
You did it. You found the Outstanding podcast. I'm your host, Casey Harper. If you haven't noticed, education is under attack in America. For years, your kids, have been taught they're racist. I guess that's not new. But now they're taught you can be a boy or a girl or none of the above. It's up to you. Girls go into the locker room and they don't know if they'll be alone. Will a boy be in there too? How dare you ask? And why are there books about LGBTQ and a lot of other stuff in the children's library? Actually, you can get kicked out of a school board for asking that question, and people have. Recently, parents have been standing up to this nonsense and standing up for their kids. And it's working. Or is it? Well, here to explain is Kendall Tietz, a researcher and investigative reporter for Defending Education. It's a group that's holding schools accountable and doing a lot of great work. Kendall, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You guys are very busy, I have to say. It's one thing I like about you. I have all this research, my whole desk here. You can't see it, but it's covered in your various reports. And, there's one that we're not going to talk too much about this, but I have this one here. This kind of gives you an idea, a listener, the kind of things we're going to be talking about here. Hayward Unified School District in California, they just passed and declared themselves a permanent sanctuary district. We have sanctuary cities. People don't want to cooperate with ICE. That's a different issue. But they're a permanent sanctuary district for LGBTQIA plus students, staff, and families that prohibits staff from notifying parents of their own child's new gender identity. They require a progress pride flag be flown at every school site indefinitely. It feels like a religious school of a faith that I've never heard of, Kendall.
Yeah, it's funny you actually bring up Hayward Unified. In one of our reports, we found the school district in California spent $200,000 on a group called Woke Kindergarten. And this was consulting for a single elementary school. So I know you kind of wanted to talk about some of these specific examples that we see in these school districts. And I kind of think that one explains itself. A group called Woke Kindergarten, I think we know what they teach.
Right.
And that same school district paid $110,000 for equity grading consulting. We've written a lot about equity grading and kind of the implications of that. So it's one school district of many, but these are some of the examples that we run into.
Right. Where is the school district?
It's in California.
Okay, and so this is the same for Hayward here, but my understanding is, I think when people hear this kind of things going on in California, there is a kind of an outrage, there's a frustration, but then there's sort of an eye roll of like, here goes California again, right? But are these, these kinds of examples, are they limited to California? It seems that they're not anymore.
No, they're not. In the case of our report called Hijacked, we looked at, 61 different school districts across the country who've used, spent almost $20 million in federal funds on, all of the woke education that we see, whether it's, race and gender-based programs, equity grading, restorative justice, DEI training, social emotional learning, which is, a way that they implement surveys to ask sometimes invasive questions about students, and then they kind of collect that data. So there's a lot of different ways that this kind of works itself into the education system. And oftentimes they're, interconnected. A lot of these issues kind of play into each other, but it's really kind of a top-down approach, I think, within the education system.
Well, top-down because the federal government's paying for it, right? That's what stands out to me.
Top-down in that sense, but also I think top-down with the unions. So, these teachers a lot of times Not all, of course, there's amazing teachers out there. I always think it's important to have that caveat, but unions as a whole are, extremely left wing.
Right.
You've seen that, the NEA, just the National Education Association, biggest union, teachers union in the country. But they just made news just this week over business items they approved at their conference over the 4th of July, calling President Trump a fascist, condemning his authoritarianism, opposing recent Supreme Court rulings. And, they came out and said they weren't even going to use Anti-Defamation League materials anymore. So, and that's pretty brazen considering the anti-Semitism that we've seen post October 7th. So it's really, when I say a top-down approach, I think a lot of times it's the unions that are pushing this, and the teachers who, once again, not all, but a lot kind of see themselves as the ones who should take charge and influence kids into, thinking the way they do about these issues. And oftentimes, instead of focusing on reading and math scores, which have really gone down since COVID, this is the stuff they're promoting.
Yeah, I mean, well, I want to talk through some of these individual studies you've done, but you bring up a great point that there's just a huge mission drift when you talk about what a school is supposed to be accomplishing and push, sending out kids into the world who know things, who know how to read, how to write, how to think intelligently. But the kids that are coming out now are really the worst we've seen in decades when it comes to performance in these categories. And I don't think it can just be blamed on COVID. But instead of putting resources towards trying to figure out what's happening, it's going towards like calling Trump a fascist. I don't see how it's relevant at all to educating kids. And then we have a huge, crisis right now, I think, with AI in education and kids using AI to write papers and do different things, do their homework for them. Basically, you can hide it in different devices. Basically, Meta has come out with glasses now that can use AI. So you can look at your test, and I don't think that's necessarily Meta's, purported purpose for the glasses, but you can wear these glasses and it will tell you, read the thing for you, memorize it. So it'll be very easy to cheat. So we're on the verge of a huge cheating crisis right on the heels of a COVID learning loss crisis. And instead of focusing on these kind of problems, we're talking about teachers unions focusing on Trump and wokeism and all this crazy stuff. And meanwhile, they're really become very political. You released a report about this, and I think it's very interesting. I want to hear you talk about it, about Title IX. And I want you to tell us about what has Trump changed on Title IX or enforcing when it comes to the trans sport issue, because this is a huge issue as well. All these things are intersecting. And my perception is that a lot of schools are just ignoring the Trump administration and hoping to get away with it. So tell me if I'm right about that or wrong.
So we have a Title IX state tracker, and we basically looked at all 50 states. And this was less of like a school by school or district level analysis and more state by state. So how do state laws conflict with what the federal government has said? So, under the Biden administration, they rewrote Title IX to say that sex discrimination includes gender identity. And obviously the Trump administration does not agree with that definition of.
So let me interrupt you.
Title
So
IX.
that's a really important thing. Sex is like how we've traditionally understood, just like boy and girl. And then when they change that meaning to be gender identity, that means you're
Quite
any
literally
number of like hundreds of
flipping
genders.
what Title IX is supposed to be on its head. So
Okay.
what it was set out to do is prohibit sex-based discrimination in any education program that receives federal funding. So that's protecting girls' sports and single-sex spaces, equal treatment for women that they really didn't have before. And, women were able to go to college and play women's sports. And this was created for women. And now you have instances where, in my view, it's really like the least feminist thing you could ever do is allow a biological male to compete in women's sports. Like, this was supposed to be a win for women, and it was for the longest time. And now what it was set out to do in 1972 is completely flipped on its head. But cue the Trump administration. They came in and they said, look, we're passing this executive order that says that, he passed it after coming into office. It says, we need to go with what Title IX was defined as, with its original intent for separate spaces for men and women, whether that's in sports or locker rooms. And basically, the Trump administration, through executive order, said states need to get in line. So what we looked at is what states are compliant and what aren't. 32 states are compliant, and 18, and DC, no surprise, are not. So that means that in those states, theoretically, and in some cases we have seen it, males can compete in female sports and access girls' locker rooms. So it was passed with that intent, and, now it's kind of been flipped on its head.
Okay, so 18 is a lot of states. I mean, I think the scope of it, we've kind of jumped around a lot so far, but we have hit on a few really big items. One, this stuff is widespread. This is not just San Francisco or Los Angeles anymore. I think for years, Fox News and other people have just been reporting on these kind of crazy one-off examples of crazy things happening in the classroom, maybe a woke thing here or there. But this is not California politics anymore. This is 18 states around the country. And the 32 that were able to toe the line with this, it was not an easy fight for all of them. Some of them resisted, and then the courts, ruled against them. And so it was not a simple issue. So this is widespread. It's federally funded in many cases, maybe not specifically these bathrooms here, but I believe the Biden administration was actually threatening to pull funding from schools that did not embrace their interpretation. So a few years ago, if you did not allow, trans boys to go play in the girls' locker room, then you could risk losing your federal funding. So I think part of what Trump's doing here is reversing that.
Well, and threatening to do the same thing, which he's gotten so much backlash for.
He's doing the exact same thing as Biden, right?
And, I would say it does kind of fall along blue and red lines as far as these states. I mean, you have kind of the non-compliant states being California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, obviously District of Columbia, Hawaii, Illinois, Maine, Massachusetts. Like these are blue states. But I would say, or coastal states, these more of the flyover states, as you like to maybe call them, are more in line and compliant with what the administration has said, and ultimately federal law, Trump state law. So these are not really optional guidelines. They kind of have to get on board. And if not, I think as we've seen in California and Maine, the Trump administration is planning to take action. And those are kind of the case studies for what we've seen so far.
Yeah, I think you make the point about feminism, which is interesting, because the point about, I think it's a really strong point. Of course, on the left, and not just the left, but there's been a lot of changes made in the last few decades to help women, protect women, give women, different spaces. And Title IX was a big part of that, because it basically went from women can't do a lot of these sports at all to saying, no, you have to provide equal resources to women's teams. That was the idea. You can't give the boys football team all the money and then have the girls soccer team is like doing fundraisers. It's not fair, right? And so it's kind of a fairness in treating women's sports the same. But now the men have just switched over, and now men have two leagues and women have one, because the women can't compete in the men's leagues in most of the time. There's a few examples, exceptions to that. And there's also a health risk here. I have a few of these examples written down. 2022, North Carolina volleyball player Peyton McNabb suffered a serious injury to her face after a male player, trans, spiked the volleyball and hit her directly in the face. Serious injury. Last year, female athlete with a trans-identified male opponent knocked her out in a field hockey game. I mean, imagine playing field hockey with a man, Kendall, just throwing an elbow into your face. It's horrible. Kip Academy in Lynn, Massachusetts, a 6-foot-tall male player with facial hair playing for the Kip Academy girls basketball team injured multiple players, and he actually injured so many players that the team had to forfeit because they didn't have players left. No, do you feel empowered as a woman listening to this kind of thing?
Definitely not. And I think
Yeah.
it's also worth pointing out that this is one of those classic 80-20 issues.
Yes.
Um, Liberals, Democrats, I think, who are middle of the line and reasonable, look at this and they say, okay, like this is not fair. We need to figure this out. At least we can't continue on um, with the way things currently are. So it's very strange that this is the hill that they're choosing to die on because,
Mhm.
I'm not a politician, but my understanding is like an 80-20 issue, not in your favor, is not a winning issue for you. So why
Right.
would you choose this as your hill to die on? I think it's something that Republicans have been able to run with and say, look, you know, this is not good. And people who are in the center, in the middle, just are probably kind of agreeing. And that's just something that I think is something for these states to think about. Like the majority of the country is not in line with that view.
Okay, so we've got these states that are disobeying, the federal mandate with the money attached. They're they're putting girls at risk by letting these male players play with them. Not to mention to me, the locker room is the most egregious thing. Thinking about putting a 15-year-old girl in a locker room with a intact male, in this case, has a beard. I mean, what are we even talking about? But
Just like you,
are
Keith.
they do what?
I said just
What'd
like
you?
you.
Yeah, just like me. I am a male, proudly.
With a beard.
Proudly a male here. Um, are they just getting away with this? Are schools just ignoring the Trump administration on Title IX enforcement and getting away with it, or are they actually going to lose funding?
I mean, I can't speak to individual schools, but like I said, federal law does trump state law. So I think we've seen instances where the administration has gone after California, and Maine, and that's been a very public fight. I think that those are kind of, like I said, the test cases, or you could even view them as warnings for other states who are kind of doubling down on this, whether it's
Hmm.
we're not going to abide by this, we're going to actively defy it, or maybe they lament and they realize they don't want to be the Trump administration's next target. So I think it kind of remains to be seen, but it seems to be that it's going to be a state by state issue. And it'll be interesting to see how everyone falls, because it's been clear that the Trump administration is not going to stand for this. And then obviously, like I said, it's a winning issue for them. I think a lot of people
Right.
agree that this can't continue. So yeah, it kind of remains to be seen.
Right. I mean, I think there's a huge wave of enforcement in
Mhm.
order here that's got to it comes soon. I mean, we saw there's a backbone and a willingness to do it with Harvard, for instance, and these other schools on the anti-Semitism issue. So they've already, crossed this line in a certain sense of cracking down on schools, but they have not yet gone for these teachers unions and these local districts, especially. I mean, and all these are not created equal. Some of them, are maybe doing mild things, but some of them are pretty heinous as far as the materials they're pushing out there about really proselytizing kids to transition their gender. I want to switch gears here and talk a little bit about the money, because we've talked, about. I think everyone kind of has an idea. Okay, there's a lot of woke stuff. There's these crazy children's books with gender and sexual things that are pretty off-putting that are being pushed on kids. We sort of know that, but I think what's lesser known is how federal funds are being used to pay for DEI and where that money is coming from. You guys have done research showing that actually a lot of the money that is being used to push, sort of woke programs is actually coming out of money that was meant to help poor kids, which in a time, when test scores, pretty much every metric of education is declining. These districts are actually, tell me I'm wrong, honestly, please. These districts are taking money from meant for poor kids and using it to do like woke programs. Is that right?
Yeah, so I think you're referring to our hijacked report.
Yes.
And this is something that we published at the end of May. And it basically looks at 61 school districts across the country who basically spent, I think I said this earlier, but almost $20 million on all these different programs. So you've got different funds. They're called Title I, II, Title IV. And then you've also got IDEA funds, which is for, disabled students. So this is millions of dollars, and this has been given to these districts by the federal government in a lot of cases to help disadvantaged students, some of the poorest among us, to get a leg up. And the unfortunate part is, the way it's sometimes spent. So it's often for race and gender-based programs, equity, restorative justice, DEI, and SEL. SEL are those surveys that I mentioned.
Yeah.
So
Emotional learning.
Right. And, this is just to push ideological content a lot of times. And it's teachers who are kind of trying to redefine discipline, grading policies. I mean, this kind of ran the gamut. We looked at a lot of different programs. So sometimes we'll hone in on DEI or whatnot. But really if you go through to this report, it has, just tons of examples of some of these key takeaways. You have a group called Panorama Education, which has gotten coverage in recent years that was paid almost $2.5 million by 17 school districts for these social emotional learning surveys, this platform that they have to facilitate these surveys.
What do you mean by like a survey?
A survey would be something that teachers give students, asking questions about invasive topics, whether it's, political beliefs, their gender. They could ask sometimes, we've seen things about asking about like your demographics. And this is stuff that, parents don't want their kids to be asked about in school. And
sure,
there's actually a federal law that, allows you to opt your child out of these programs, but you really have to be kind of your own advocate and your child's advocate, because oftentimes it's, they find a way to give these surveys to students. So we saw, SEL surveys. You've got DEI training. So we have Elk Grove Unified in California as well, that paid a group called Improve Your Tomorrow $4.4 million in Title I funds, which is, once again,
we're in the
Title
wrong
I
business, Kendall. $4 million for a slideshow that you and I could probably make with AI in about 2 hours.
It's insane. It's proven extremely lucrative. Kind of, I would say, since the racial reckoning, I guess you could call it, of 2020. But they're basically just facilitating programs, and this is once again Title I, which is our funds that are truly meant for disadvantaged students. And this program is for, students of a specific race and gender. And that is a shame, because
so it's legal. So just to be clear, they're spending this money and saying you can only come if you're like a black girl or something like that. Like you can only come if you're a black boy or a Hispanic
I know
boy.
it sounds crazy, but the wording they use is, quote, young men of color.
Gotcha. So everyone but white people, basically. That's kind of the theme in a lot of the DEI stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I believe it was specifically targeted towards men. And it's worth noting that, there are certain demographics who are disadvantaged and they might need more help. And we want to get those people all the academic help they can get. You just have to make sure that you do it in a legal way that doesn't discriminate based on race, because that would be a violation of Title VI. So, we just pulled a lot of different examples of these title funds that, are used in ways that are maybe not the most beneficial when there's failing reading and writing and math scores in our schools. So, sometimes I think maybe the intention is good, but I think something that educators could probably benefit from is return to the basics. Teach kids how to read and write. I think leave. I guess help kids be good people. Sure, of course, that's what we want. But I think those conversations about societal problems, politics, whatever it might be, I think the majority of people would say that as a parent, they want to reserve that right. There's always exceptions, but overall, parental rights is usually a winning issue among those who are sending their kids off to school in the morning.
Okay, well, you're kind of ruining my day here. So at first I find out that for the most part, nothing is being done to most of these schools, ignoring the transgender rulings. Maybe that's going to change. There has been some enforcement, but it seems like a lot more is warranted. And now I've learned from my good friend Kendall here that we are spending tons of money to help kids who are maybe in poor neighborhoods, but the money, instead of being used to like hire tutors or set up programs on Saturday for them to come in and learn more, it's basically just being given to consultants who are stealing the money to make slideshows and present it to faculty,
Right.
or to survey kids to find out like how many of them are gay or bisexual, and then to store that data into different things and keep breaking people into groups and kind of understanding the problem as if that's going to like help kids learn or not. Is that my kind of simplistic but true assessment?
Yeah. And I would recommend, if you're interested, go to defendinged.org, look at our investigations page. The specific report I'm talking about is hijacked. It's not like the sexiest subject, but it is interesting to look at all these different types of funds. I won't bore everyone with kind of explaining each one, but we do have these different funds that are supposed to help kids, and it's interesting when you see them kind of broken down in what their original intent was, and then how this money is being used. So yeah, once again, I would direct people to go look at the actual report. We have a lot of like very helpful links, and it's broken down by state and then each district that we covered, with links to these contracts or where this money is coming from. But it's also important to note that, this report is intended to kind of serve as a snapshot of how districts use these federal funds, but many districts, they don't make it like publicly known which funds it draws from to pay for these programs. So in reality, the number could be much higher.
It has to be, right? For every $1 you find out about, there's 10 doing the same thing that you don't know
right.
about.
I mean, we can't say for certain if we don't have the link to back it up. I'll say that, but no, I mean, it's definitely not a comprehensive report. I'll say that.
Right. And so I love your research. That's why I wanted to have you on and talk through this, because normally you kind of roll your eyes when people.
It's not just me, so
sure. Yeah, you have a great team there, and I know some people over there like Sarah and Casey Ryan and others. But you kind of normally roll your eyes when people plug their website. It's kind of a normal thing. But I will actually endorse that plug as to the extent that people should go and check it out for themselves, because it's very interactive. You can look by your state. It's not just like a long white paper that's 200 pages. Everything they have, what I like is everything is linked. So there's no claims that are not hyper. Anything you say that can't be true. It's already linked. You click on it, it takes you right to the page with whatever ridiculous thing that you thought couldn't be true. They link right to it. And so I do like that. They break a lot of things down by state and even by like locally. So if you want to know, is this happening in my state, you can go on there and look, and there's a lot of different reports. Before we're done here, Kendall, I think, I didn't mean to order these this way, but I think they're increasingly depressing. And this is maybe the worst one. And every time I ask you about this report, I'm hopeful you're going to tell me that it's not as bad as I think it is. But you have a report here. This came out in June of this year. This is a newer one. That equitable grading.
Yes.
Money is being spent to develop equitable grading programs. Is this really what it sounds like, where kids of a certain demographic basically get better grades merely because of their skin color? It can't be that, right?
I mean, somewhat. Okay. It's kind of a radical rethinking of how you should grade. And it definitely is kind of based.
Yeah, radical. I mean, I thought it was like who got the most right answers. I guess I'm radical. Let's hear the new. No, okay.
So let's see. traditional grading, I can kind of put it into two subjects. You've got traditional grading and then you've got equitable grading. So in a traditional grading system, you might get a 0 for not turning in your work. No work equals no grade. But in an equitable grading system, maybe they just say, no, we're not going to give zeros. Zeros don't exist. If you don't turn your work in, the minimum you can make is a 50%. And I'm not saying this is the case in all equitable grading systems, but these are kind of the examples that we see. Or there's no deadlines, so there's no penalties for late work. You can just kind of turn in your assignment whenever you want. Or unlimited revisions or retakes. You can just keep retaking your test until you reach a certain grade. Which I think in theory sounds like a huge headache for teachers. And then, sometimes teachers will consider things like participation, behavior, and that might factor into a grade. What is your presence like in the classroom? That might be considered racist, and you can't do that. And it's really kind of an inflated grading system in the sense of, if you don't turn in your work, but you still get a 50, I mean, it doesn't really make any sense. So the premise behind it is kind of this social justice vibe, I guess you could say, of like, anything that's traditionally graded is racist or biased. So this is kind of an anti-racist approach where, unequal outcomes equals oppression. So it's not, It's not mastery of the subject, it's equalizing results. And I think what I've pointed to a lot of times in these instances is that ultimately, I mean, in theory, unless our whole society adopts something like this will catch up to students. So this is not beneficial to them. Like, the real world eventually catches up to you, if you get into college based on, a false sense of mastery of, your physics class in high school, and you are an engineering major in college, I mean, I don't think you're going to be able to keep up. If you weren't tested in high school, you don't have those foundations, those basics. And if not in college, then eventually in the workforce. So
maybe not engineering. You could probably go into HR and get away with it, but
you also don't want inept people. It doesn't matter their skin color. That doesn't matter. Nobody's talking. Like, nobody cares about that. What we care about is, if you're my doctor, can you treat me? Are you qualified to treat me? If you're building the building I'm in right now, are you able to make sure it doesn't fall over? I mean, that's. Yeah. I know it sounds dramatic, but I think it's more important than people realize.
There's no equitable gravity or equitable diseases that account for a doctor's competence.
Exactly.
There's a few things, so this is in 42 school districts at least. This is just what you found. So it could be a lot more. You found at least 42. And I want to point out two things you said as we start to wrap up here. You talked about outcomes. And I think this is an important way to understand, like, the thinking of the people who are behind this. They see differing outcomes as evidence of racism itself. It cannot be. So if white students are getting better grades than black students, you say, how is this happening? Their only answer is racism. It cannot be that the white students, studied more, or even maybe you're just, wealthier, or like have better, two parents at home or anything. The only factor is it must be racism, and therefore there's sort of a moral obligation to correct it. And I think there's some uncomfortable conversations they don't want to have there. But then on the solution, I think the solution is actually very racist itself, because these assessments, this equitable grading, is another name for it is anti-racist assessments, anti-racist assessment. But I just think it's incredibly racist to say, if we want to help, kids of color or teenagers of color,
we need to lower the standards.
We need to lower the standards.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it's saying.
100%.
If they say, if we lower the standards, it will help kids of color more than white kids. And that is, if that's like a racist thing to say inherently. It's funny how a lot of DEI things claim to solve a problem that often isn't really the problem, and then their solution is more racist than the problem they claim.
100%. I think that's a really good way to look at it. And like you said, I think this is a theme with a lot of, quote, anti-racist and DEI programs. It's racist to think that we should have to dumb down the standards for any race, a certain race. That doesn't have anything to do with it. Like, this is America. Everybody can be successful and achieve great things if they work hard, you know? So I think it's really dangerous when you look at everything through the lens of race. And I think a little bit broad picture, I mean, you say we're wrapping up. I think a broad picture thing to look at that people should think about is this is something that manifests in all facets of life. And if you've got teachers who are telling kids at a really young age, like, your worth is based on your race. I mean, I certainly didn't grow up that way. Right. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's not beneficial for anybody. And what's going to happen 20 years down the line when all these kids who are in kindergarten right now, let's say these kids who are in the Hayward Unified School District that I told you about, and they went to woke kindergarten, literally, like, what are they going to be thinking in 20 years? I mean, I think that's really scary. We don't want our kids to be viewing everything through the lens of race. I don't think that's beneficial for anybody. And I think it honestly just ends up making people more racist.
Yeah, that's the long-term effect. I think that's a great way to put it. It's, you can only kind of create this false world of grading on a racial curve for so long until kids go out into the real world. And you sort of get smacked with reality. And I think it's all very divisive as well. I think you're right. Not to mention that this is all happening as test scores and all these things fail. And so I think we have a big problem here. I think we've done a good job here of unpacking some of the big core pillars when it comes to grading, when it comes to the gender issue, when it comes to how the money is being used, and maybe some things the Trump administration can do to stop it. Let me ask you just sort of a final question here, Kendall. For who has the power to do something about this? As far as, is this all just Trump or Congress or the states or school boards? Who can actually fix some of these problems? And what can parents or just the concerned aunt or uncle who's listening, what can they do to be a part of the solution to this issue? Yeah,
I mean, I don't think it's one person who's gonna fix this. I mean, you obviously have the Trump administration saying, you have to do the bare minimum. You have to abide by our federal laws or our federal mandates, at least right now. So you've got the federal government. I think Congress can take action in certain instances. I think education does tend to be very local, though, and that's kind of why I've talked a lot about the state by state standards. So you've got your state. You've got the education department, which is a whole controversy in itself. And then you've got just in the sense that, is it going to shut down? Some people are for that. Some people are against. I'm not. I'm just saying, like, then you've got the statewide Department of Education. So, you've got that. And then you've got it on the local level. Maybe a school district in your town or your county, and then you've got the school board that sits on it. So I think the biggest thing in that, defending education started out as kind of an organization for parents. I think we've expanded into higher education. We're marketing towards students too, but at the end of the day, I think it's parents who are informed, and that's what a lot of our resources do. They teach parents about, hey, this is an issue. If it wasn't on your radar, now it is. And maybe it's happening in your school. You should look at it, So I think it's like you do have to be your own advocate. And I think it probably starts more often than not at the local level. And then obviously there's a federal trickle down effect too. But I would say parents just being watchdogs in a way for their districts and making sure that they're seeing the results they want and that their kids are being taught things that they would like to see them be taught. I know that sounds simple, but I think a lot of our research proves that's not happening.
Right. Yeah. As you said, it's a great way to put it. It's not happening anymore. It was simple. The school system that, you parents listening grew up with is quickly eroding. It's being replaced with something else. And if you're sitting around waiting for somebody on Capitol Hill in Congress or President Trump to fix all these problems, it's not going to happen. The president is doing some things, Congress is doing some things, but this is very local. Education's a state, very local issue. And you actually have a lot more, as a listener, you have a lot more influence on education than a lot of other issues. And so I think that Kendall's making a great point there, that if you've been convicted, if you've been grieved, if you've been sort of pierced by some of this information, then maybe it's time for us to start speaking out, to start spreading the word. You can share this podcast, of course. There's plenty of things you can do. You can advocate school boards, governors, your state Department of Education. There's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of truth to be said. We're out of time, Kendall. Thank you for educating us. I learned a lot, a little concerning, but you threw a lot of really good information at us. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Casey. Great to be here.
Yeah. Well, this is the Outstanding Podcast. Thanks for listening. You can, as always, like and subscribe. And as I said, please share this with someone. I'll tell you, a lot of the algorithms are not our friend these days. So we rely on you sharing it, posting it, your Facebook, your Twitter, your Instagram, emailing it around. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back next week on Outstanding.
Outstanding is a production of The Washington Stand, your source for news and commentary from a biblical worldview. This podcast is made in the USA by producer Casey Harper, production assistant Rachel Woods, technical producers David Salkeld and Yusuf Fletcher, and executive producer Jared Bridges. Help support us by texting the word Outstanding to 67742 and read more at washingtonstand.com.